Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello, Bob Wells here, and welcome to another episode of Undercurrent Stories. Human beings have come a long way since our beginnings. From our origins as hunter-gatherers through to the development of our agrarian societies 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, the industrial revolutions of 200 years ago, and now the modern global information society, we've come a long way. So we've become very smart. And yet in today's modern interconnected world, so many people suffer from stress, depression, anxiety, and other psychological and emotional issues. We don't seem to have fixed that. And the normal answer is to seek medications from our healthcare systems. But is that the answer? Medications can take their toll too, with physical side effects. Is there an alternative? Well, my guest today would argue that there is. We live in a time where we can combine lots of alternative methods of healing. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Brigitte Mars to the show. Brigitte is a herbalist, Naropa University professor and author. Her latest book is called Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, Holistic Methods and Techniques for a Happy and Healthy Mind. The book presents a wealth of holistic self-care therapies that are designed to heal the mind and nurture the soul, two essential keys to a happy and joyful life. Hello and welcome to the show, Brigitte.
It is my pleasure and honor, Bob. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sending the book, which I've read. I've really enjoyed the book. It's very much going to go on to the reference part of my library. And I think what it did for me, it sort of took away a lot of the mystique, where I think a lot of us just sort of, we go to ordinary medicine. We look at alternative medicine. It can be quite mystical and all the rest of it. But this was actually real, what I would call common sense and understandable. So, yeah, great. So thanks ever so much for a great book.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to offer something that can help people.
So before we talk about the book itself, could you just please tell us a bit about yourself, your life's journey, and how you became interested in natural remedies, please?
Indeed. I grew up in upstate New York in the United States, but I had this wonderful French-Canadian grandmother that I would go visit, and she was really big on folk remedies. And I love these folk remedies. They didn't involve shots. They didn't involve drugs. They involved food and herbs and things like the placement and things that people might call old wives' tales, in that they really seem to work. And I was very fascinated with them. And so at a very young age, I went to an all-girls school and I started offering these folk remedies to my classmates for things like headaches and cramps and stress. And they seemed to really work. And I said, I don't know what you call this, and I don't know anyone who's doing this as a profession, but it seems to make sense. And I felt this kinship that this was medicine that had been used by millions of people for thousands of years. And of course, in my own home growing up, it was the latest antibiotic and the latest technique, some of which have gotten banned, finding out that, it causes cancer, we better not do that anymore. So I just kept studying these folk remedies. And, we now have an opportunity to tap into thousands of years of recorded information from many, many different cultures, from Ayurveda, from Chinese medicine. And again, I've written 18 books, so writing these books has been like a college education on every one of these topics, whether it be herbs or food. And, it is interesting too, Bob, that we do know that our mental body can affect our physical body. We know that stress and anxiety can make us sick, weaken our immunity. And so my book, Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, is all about that the physical body can affect the emotional body. And there are things that we can do. So I'm just really happy to present this. And as you said, a lot of it is practical, common sense. And I think we've given the power of our health over to someone else. And so here's an opportunity that there are things that you can do.
Well, that's excellent. And that certainly comes across in the book. I'm very interested in the history of herbal medicine, because you mentioned there that, we've been using it for thousands of years through our ancestors. And I guess when modern medicine came out in probably, I don't know, 18th century, something like that, I don't know. Where do you get all the information from these herbal remedies? I mean, is it all written down somewhere, or do you have to speak to people? How do you get that information, Brigitte?
Well, that's a good question. And of course, in the beginning, there were books that you could read. There have been books written for hundreds of years. Originally, a lot of them were just written in Latin. And then we have the great British herbalist Nicholas Culpeper, who translated some of the Latin texts so they would be more accessible to the common person who just had a little bit of information. But I mean, there's books that go back to the 1st century AD, Dioscorides writing the Materia Medica. So, now we live in a time where there's thousands of books. And I've had many teachers along the way, Michael Tierra and Christopher Hobbs and Susan Weed and Rosemary Gladstar. So there have been a lot of pioneers in this herbal movement. So again, when someone says these products have not been tested, I like to remind them they've been used by millions of people for thousands of years. And that's a lot more history and trial and error than the latest drug that gets rolled out and then often gets recalled later on when we learn more about it. So I feel that this is medicine for the people, but one thing that did happen, Bob, in 1917 in the United States, one of the very wealthy families, the Rockefeller Foundation, sent a man named Mr. Flexner around to all the medical schools in the United States and made a deal with them. And the deal was, if you will only persist in teaching the new modern medicine, the new pharmaceuticals, you will get funding for your school. And if you persist in teaching about, chamomile tea and peppermint and ginger, no funding for you. And so in Europe, the herbal tradition really didn't leave as quickly as it did in the United States. Because if you go into a drugstore, I know in France or Germany and probably England too, you're going to find herbal remedies and homeopathic remedies along with modern pharmaceuticals. So I don't want it to be an us and them. I feel that the best medicine is going to come when we put our heads and hearts together and, work together and try to unravel some of this. But I'm really big on trying to get to the cause of some of these ailments. Not just how do we treat it, but how do we prevent it? And how do we help a person really step into total health and know that what we eat, what we drink, what we think, what media we expose ourselves to can all have an effect, not only in the body, but the psyche as well.
Yeah, and that really comes across in the book with things like color therapy. Going back to what you're saying, more the life. Can you make a lifestyle changes? Are you eating far too much sugar? Are you exercising enough? Are you getting enough daylight and all that sort of stuff? All basic. Well, you say basic stuff. We obviously not, are we? But all stuff that we, I guess, ought to know and should be doing, and our ancestors were probably doing that more. Being in the open and all the rest of it. And I always find going on a nice long walk when I can is always great therapy, especially in a forest.
Oh, I love that. And, soaking in the bathtub and even things like, depressed people when they just wear gray all the time and go home to a dirty, dingy home with dirty dishes, that's depressing. And so there's lifestyle things you can do, invigorate your lifestyle, your living space, choose colors that are uplifting and invigorating, have a day planner with you so you don't feel overwhelmed. That's a really simple thing that can contribute to stress, especially when you get to be, over 40 and you're not only thinking about your life, but maybe you've got kids and career and all things that you're doing for the place that you work at. So download it. Don't try to keep it all in here. Have a companion. I always say it's like having more RAM where you write things down. If you think it, ink it is a saying I like to remind people of.
Yeah, that's certainly very true. I actually put on a different shirt for this interview because I thought it was quite a nice
color. I like that. Well, blue is really calming. When we're stressed, we should wear blue. I have a lot going on today, and I'm actually giving a class on edible flowers, so I thought I would dress sort of like a flower.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Lovely colour. Is that a crimson sort of colour you have?
Yes, or hot pink, and I believe it's vintage Afghani tradition made by the Kuchi women of Afghanistan before they had to wear burqas all the time. So
Yeah, and that was the other thing you mentioned in the book about how you suggest that people wear loose clothes.
yes, so you can breathe. Absolutely. So there's so many things we can do, and very often when we go to the doctor, you start out with drugs. And for physical conditions, if the drugs don't work, then there's always surgery. But in the realm of natural medicine, there's so many things we can do. We can look at things like the condition of where we live. We can think of, are we listening to podcasts and things that are depressing and watching TV shows about murder and mayhem and war? I mean, just listening to the news can make us feel a bit anxious. But then there's, as you mentioned, things like sugar, caffeine intake. Are we getting enough protein? Are we getting enough essential fatty acids? What about B vitamins? Are we eating all the colors of the rainbow? And we can even think about, if we're always only microwaving our food, and then people say, I feel zapped. I feel burnt out, and we're constantly over processing our food. I feel fried. That's a saying in this country. If you're fried, it means you're incapacitated. So maybe you don't want to zap and fry your food. Maybe you want to go for more fresh and alive and vital. Very often, diets become rather beige. And we know that when we eat all the colors of the rainbow, that each one of those colors gives us different phytonutrients. So I'm really big on, what can you eat that's red? Watermelon, tomatoes, cherries, orange is also very energizing, peaches and apricots and mangoes and winter squash. So eating a more colorful diet could be a simple place to get started. And very often people eat things that they're allergic to. They often crave things they're allergic to. Maybe it's wheat, maybe it's gluten, soy, corn. Could eating something we're allergic to, which we know can cause inflammation in the body, but it can also cause inflammation in the brain. And that can contribute to people feeling foggy and unable to focus and not being able to complete tasks. So I'm saying, maybe looking at what we put in our bodies, it does affect us. It affects us, and we make choices every day. We could even say, some of the modern farming practices that go on in the United States, factory farming, overcrowded sections of animal husbandry where the animals feel anxious and stressed all the time. Could that be affecting us? So if we are going to eat animal products, maybe supporting the farmers who are doing things in a more natural lifestyle where there's plenty of room and the animals actually, get to be outside and eat their natural things, which are often not grains, but maybe grass. So these are all things that we could look at. And I also, look at not only do we have food, do we have herbs, but, even a simple thing like smelling an essential oil. So, for example, someone could feel like, I'm so stressed out. I know I'm going to be late. I'm overwhelmed. And what do? The radio's playing really fast music that's beating faster than our heart. We've had more caffeine than is really comfortable and sustainable for us. But a simple thing like opening a bottle of lavender oil and taking 5 deep inhalations, it goes right to our brain. And it affects us almost immediately. That's a simple, non-drug-like thing that we could do that might have an immediate effect on our psyche. And it works with, kids too. So I also love to bring in the idea that essential oils or aromatherapy might be another thing. So many ideas, so many things that are inexpensive, accessible, things that you could buy at a natural food store or that you might already have in your pantry.
Yeah, there's so much there. And that's why I said at the beginning of the conversation that, it is a reference book, your book, and certainly to pick up from time to time when you need some advice on something. And I guess the message that you've got, which is a very, very important message for society. what sort of support are you getting? And should we say this? I mean, obviously, this podcast will, if it touches one or two people, it'd be great. But it's such an important subject. How is the word getting around? I mean, is it something being taught in schools? Is it something which perhaps the pharmaceutical industry are beginning to recognise? Is it something that GPs are now thinking about, or have we got a long way to go, Brigitte?
Well, I do think that the pharmaceutical industry is looking for things that they can make a profit on. Therefore, we could use an herb that is free, that might be growing in the countryside, but the pharmaceutical companies are looking at, can we make a drug out of that and sell it to the public? For example, a great example is the dandelion. The dandelion, almost everybody recognizes that plant. It's good for the liver. The flowers are high in lutein, which is good for our eyes. Dandelion is an herb that might help some people have less depression because it helps to detoxify the liver. And are the pharmaceutical companies going to study and promote a plant that is growing in people's yards? No, they're going to look for, are there any active ingredients in that plant that we can isolate or extract and sell to the public? Because doing medical research is very expensive. And in order to bring a drug into the marketplace, you're going to have to do a lot of research, and you cannot patent a plant. Therefore, they're going to look for something that could help regain those profits. And again, I know that we are certainly better off, that there are pharmaceutical drugs, that antibiotics can save lives in many occasions. So it's not like I'm dissing that. I'm really just trying to help empower people that there are things you can do, and maybe you don't want to be on the drugs forever. Maybe you're thinking, well, I'd like to have a baby someday, and maybe these drugs saved my life for a while, but I would like to have more tools in my pocket, so when I do decide to get off the drugs, or before I decide to get on the drugs, maybe I could take some steps with food, with herbs, with essential oils, with feng shui, with color, with wonderful things like walking, gardening, things, looking at what we choose to put in our consciousness, and therefore make a positive difference in our lives. And overall, it's going to be good for our health in general, because it's all connected. It's not separate, like the mind is this and the body's this. We know that they work together.
Could you give some examples, please, Brigitte, of particular herbs and particular disorders that are in the book?
Okay.
For example, depression, just so people could just get an idea of what you're talking
Yes.
about.
Indeed. Thank you. So I do draw on some of the wisdom from Asian medicine as well. Some of my teachers have taught Chinese medicine. So in Asian medicine, when we have depression, there not only are, there's things that we get depressed about in life. You're unhappy in a relationship, or your kids aren't, turning out the way you were hoped, or maybe you don't really love your job. I mean, that's different. Depression is actually biochemical and can really affect people. But in Asian medicine, they look at what's going on with the health of the liver. That the liver helps to detoxify the blood. It does many things. And so with depression, we could look at what kind of oils are you eating? Are you eating a lot of fried foods? Are you eating a lot of chips? Could you do better by making your own salad dressing? Our liver loves the sour flavor in moderation. So would a simple practice like drinking lemon and water, this is an ancient folk remedy. Start your day with lemon and water instead of caffeine. What about eating more green leafy vegetables? That's another thought. What about the quality of fats that you're eating? Rather than getting fats from fried food and chips, maybe you could start making your own salad dressing with extra virgin olive oil. Now, herbs that can help depression, one of the most famous is St. John's wort, which is contraindicated if you're already on antidepressants because it might be too much. But we know that St. John's wort can help serotonin to survive longer. It also enhances light receptivity. So we do know that many people suffer from depression when they go to work in the dark, they work under fluorescent lighting all day, then they go home in the dark, maybe they're wearing sunglasses and sunscreen all day. So St. John's wort enhances light sensitivity. But there's other herbs, lavender, for example, lemon balm. Lemon balm, which is a common garden plant in the mint family, Melissa officinalis, has been known to, and I'm quoting the ancient texts that go back to the 1st century AD, lemon balm maketh the sad heart merry. And lemon balm grows so easily. It's in people's gardens. You can eat it. You can make pesto out of it. You can make tea out of it. And it's wonderful for the bees. So those are just a couple, things that people might do. And then we could even look at, there's supplements. There's things like, amino acids that people could use. And again, I encourage people when they read my book to use a yellow highlighter. Because as you said, it is a reference book. So let's say you highlight like, oh, that sounds interesting. Maybe I want to research that. Or maybe I want to put that on my list of things to buy at the health food store or the natural pharmacy or ask my doctor about. Therefore, again, not everyone needs to read about dementia. But maybe some of our listeners are concerned for their parents and want to read that part. So it is really a reference book, but I'd say read the whole thing with a yellow highlighter and then go back and see what is relevant to you and then take action. Because just reading about it's not going to do a big thing, but you might get some ideas of what you can do. And if I have time, Bob, I'd love to just say a few things about anxiety, because that's another concern. And so we do know that people are more prone to anxiety when they have low blood sugar. So let's say someone doesn't eat breakfast, they have a cup of black tea or coffee, and then maybe they have something sweet later on to get them through the morning. Well, what's going to happen is sweets will elevate your blood sugar, and then it's going to drop. And then, we think about everything's moving really fast. There's fast music. Your work can tend to be stressful. Everything's rush, rush, rush. Maybe you have more caffeine, more sugar. Okay, so people are really depressed and anxious, and their heart is racing, and they're listening to the news, and that's enough to make us anxious already. So I'm going to say things for anxiety could be as simple as focusing on your breath, breathing deeper and slower, wearing relaxing colors like blue. Maybe instead of having too much caffeine, you pick some calming herbs like chamomile, passion flower, which doesn't make you passionate. It makes you more relaxed. Maybe skullcap, but I know chamomile is very popular in England and a wonderful tisane that tastes beautiful. Maybe you smell some lavender oil. Maybe you put some more calming, tranquil music on. These are a few things. And there are some supplements that people can use. There's something called Rescue Remedy that was also a remedy that was first used in England by the bacteriologist Elon Batch, who I think people often refer to as Bach. He makes a wonderful little formula called Rescue Remedy. This is a little miracle in a bottle. You put 2 drops under your tongue and it has a very calming, tranquilizing effect. So it's just good to know that there are things you can do, but the idea is to be prepared and have them when you need them, not like, oh, I left it at home. Maybe you need to have it with you at work or in the glove compartment so that you're ready when you need that.
Well, thank you for that. And there's lots of others we could talk about. If we've got people who are, well, 2 questions really. One was sort of health and safety thing about going around the garden or around the forest, picking various plants, not quite knowing what they are. Obviously that's you have to be careful doing that. But I noticed you've got an app that
Yes.
you can identify plants. Could you just say something on that, please?
Surely. There is an app that I did not create. It's called Picture This, and it's $20 a year, and I love it because it even works in the jungles of Colombia in South America. And if you don't have
so it's international.
Yes. And if you don't have cell phone reception, when you get back to the hotel or the bus or whatever, it'll tell you what those plants were that you took pictures of.
Yeah.
But I did design a phone app called I Plant, letter I, Plant with Brigitte Mars, and it'll tell you about the herb, What does it do? Oh, it's an antidepressant. It's a hypnotic. It's a diuretic, a diaphoretic. It'll tell you all that. It'll also give you information. It'll have a picture of the plant, but it'll say should not be used during pregnancy or use with caution in cases of high blood pressure. So I Plant with Brigitte Mars is the app that I created with a couple of, I like to say they were Mormon Navy SEALs. They were like survivalists that had this idea to take one of my books and turn it into a phone app. So the information is out there. And again, we live in a time where there's so much information, and it is good to know what are the poisonous plants. Yes, there are poison plants like poison hemlock and poison ivy and death camas, but there's also a lot of plants that are very, very useful. And so maybe you don't learn all of them in one season, but what if we made it a goal to learn 5 new plants every year or 10 new plants every year and get some books on the plants of your area? We don't need to know the plants everywhere, but if you're in England, there's beautiful illustrated and photographed books on plants of England, of every state, Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy. I do love knowing the plants all over the world, and I love the beautiful plants in England. And, certainly Shakespeare was resplendent with herbs like violet and hawthorn and rose. So England has a wonderful tradition of herbal medicine, and it really never should have gone away. And, during World War II, it was the women that really knew the herbs, like, okay, well, we're depending on foreign imports, and where are people going to get their vitamin C? And people would go out and collect the rose hips to help keep the British population healthy, because you've got an abundance of rose hips growing there, which is a great source of vitamin C.
Yes, it's all there for us waiting, isn't it, really?
It is, and even things like, pine needles. So make it a part of your goal to get a book of plants of your area so that you know what to do. And of course, all around the world, we're looking at many countries that are in crises and emergencies, whether it be war or whether it be global catastrophe or weather changes. It is good to be prepared. And I think so often, what would we do if the ships weren't coming in or the planes weren't delivering this or that? Like, it really is very comforting to know what could you do if the stores were empty. And I know that all around the world, if not us right now, other places are dealing with this. And it's really a shame that people don't know that there's free wild food growing everywhere.
Yeah, one of the ones that made me slightly smile was hops in the book, because I do have quite a lot of hops, but not in the form that you described. They tend to be in a glass with alcohol.
Well, and hops is the only herb that's in the same family as cannabis. Interesting. They are both in the Cannabaceae family, the only plants in the Cannabaceae family. And hops is very calming. So, of course, people sometimes drink beer because it has a calming, sedative effect, but it could also be made into a tea or a capsule or a tincture, which is a alcoholic extract. And another use of hops, I believe King George slept with one, a hops pillow. So you'd make a sachet of dried hops, strobiles, and put it in your pillowcase, and the smell would help you to sleep. And we also know that hops is very antimicrobial, great for fighting infection. So there's a lot of uses. It probably was even a preservative in the beer. So, and hops grows wild, and it has many medicinal uses, not just beer making. But of course, sometimes in history, when clean water wasn't available, you were safer drinking beer than maybe the water out of a river. And I heard that at one time, drinking beer was considered safer than drinking the water, and that drinking beer replaced drinking tea for a while because it was like a morning beverage, and it does have some B vitamins. So I'm not dissing hops.
Red wine gets a lot of high press at the moment, I've noticed. I don't know if that's the industry behind it, but certainly they there's a general sort of consensus through the media that drinking red wine is pretty good for you. What would you say about that?
Well, red wine does have a lot of antioxidants. Unfortunately, there's often, pesticides used in growing it, maybe not as much in Europe. Um, and in, moderation, there can be some antimicrobial benefits of using red wine. It could be high in iron, blood building. I'm personally not a big alcohol consumer, but a lot of my friends are. And so, yes, there's virtues in that as well. And of course, being able to sterilize a wound, and a lot of the old literature. I'm thinking of the TV show Outlander. It's like, oh, he's
Oh, yeah.
fainted. Get the whiskey. That seems to be a remedy for many things too. So
One of the other, I don't know whether you call it a herb or a plant or wildflower, and the very name sort of made me sort of think twice about it, was the stinging nettle. I mean, that gets a real high profile.
I love stinging nettle. I have a book coming out soon called Nettle Power. So nettles, if I were going to another planet, I would bring nettles with me. They are so amazing.
Oh, really?
They were certainly used as a fiber plant. I have a nettle dress because it was used to make everything from tablecloths to soldiers' uniforms. Nettles are so high in protein. They're also very high in iron. They're one of the best remedies for allergies, which many people suffer in the springtime, pollen allergies. Nettles can help ameliorate the itchy eyes and the runny nose and the scratchy throat and all those things. It can build the blood. So nettles is extraordinary, and it's also edible. As a matter of fact, last night, we made a dandelion nettle sponacopita. And it is a traditional herb in Europe, and it grows very easily. And of course, it can sting you, if you touch it. But the sting is actually therapeutic for arthritic joints.
Oh, right.
Really? Yeah.
Amazing.
So it is amazing. So people who have arthritis, they might sting their arthritic hands, and it stings you for a few minutes, but it brings fresh blood flow to the area, and ultimately it will reduce inflammation. And it was even used at one time in history to prevent amputations. It increases circulation to the afflicted area. It's good for hair loss. It's good. I do nettle facelifts. I'm 71. I probably never will get a facelift. And I sometimes sting my face with nettles and say, well, this is my version of a facelift. It makes you kind of all rosy. And again, there's no harm in getting stung with nettles. It doesn't leave splinters in you. So if you have nettles, I truly think it is one of the most useful plants on the planet.
Yeah, and I guess when you cook it, the sting goes, does it?
That's right. If you cook it, or if you blend it, or if you puree it, or if you dry it, that really minimizes the sting. So we dry nettles in the summertime, and then in the winter we make tea out of it. It's so good for your bones. Many elderly people are concerned, like if you fall, that might be the end of your free and easy lifestyle. You become bedridden and incapacitated. But I do find that nettles is so mineral rich, we could all benefit from it.
And it's on our doorstep, which is good as well. For people that are thinking of purchasing the book or reading it, or are very interested in hearing more about you, and they're not suffering, they believe, from anxiety or depression, but they regard themselves as fairly sort of average. What would top herbs would you suggest that they consider for sort of overall well-being and feeling good, Brigitte?
Well, I do think that in general, it's good to look at what grows around you. I'm not going to recommend something from the far reaches of Tibet. I think that start with what you have growing around you. And nettles, if it grows around you, dandelion, chickweed, violet. These are often common plants that grow in people's yards. And I did hear that until like the 1880s, people would actually rip the grass out of the yard to make room for the more edible plants. And then it became sort of a thing of the aristocracy to show how affluent they were not to have these common medicinal plants. So people would, drive by in their carriages and see, oh, you didn't have, chickweed and nettles and dandelion. You had, oh, they must be so rich. It was a way of
Yeah.
showing off your wealth, not to have the medicinal herbs that, the doctor came and brought you leeches and, the latest drug or whatever. So I do think that very often the common weeds that are growing in your yard, and that maybe we should be thinking about more edible yards, so that you have fresh medicine all the time. So I love that when I make a salad, it's not imported from another state. I'm going to make a salad from the chickweed, the violet, the dandelion. Maybe we don't want to eat nettle as a salad because it will sting your mouth, but we could certainly use it in a cooked dish. So start with that and learn some of the herbs that grow around you. And England has a long and rich history of herbalism that you can tap into. And I really love that.
Yeah, you hit on a note there, Brigitte, where you mentioned about plants in season. And there's something quite nice about having, say, strawberries in May or June when they come out. And then maybe having to wait a little bit longer. And then the rhubarb in the autumn and all that, well, throughout the summer. There's something, and all the stuff that comes out in the autumn, as opposed to just be going into a supermarket where you can get a blackberry that's been grown in Spain or something under plastic in December. There's something quite nice about that.
And, people know, tropical fruit is going to taste better when it's in season and again, I'm going to wait for the peaches that are ripe in my area. They're going to be a lot better than something shipped in maybe from another continent. Therefore, we are helping to support using less gasoline and trucking. We're supporting our local farmers and keeping our own communities strong and supporting the farmers. And I remember one time being in a restaurant in Switzerland in the springtime. They had 12 items on the menu: asparagus quiche, asparagus souffle, asparagus soup, asparagus salad, because it was asparagus season. And they said, come back next week. We're going to have, something else. And the freshness of eating something that was just growing a few minutes ago, there's really something to that. And I remember, being in Iceland and I saw like a mango for, $10 that came from Brazil. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is not really supporting the Icelandic economy. They have a lot of kale and potatoes and, eat what's growing around you. It's going to be more kind to the environment, probably fresher and probably better for you. Because when they have to pick something way before it ripens, it really isn't even fully developed and it's never going to taste quite as good.
Brigitte, what are your thoughts on vegetarianism and meat eating?
Well, I think people might need to try different diets at different times of their lives. I became vegetarian when I was probably 15 or 16 years old, and I still eat a lot of vegetarian food, but I don't consider myself a strict vegetarian right now, partly because my partner is not, but I also feel that sometimes meat could be medicine when it's really cold. But I think people need to do what's right for them. I still eat mostly plant-based, and I really love eating that way. I've also been a raw foodist. I've been a macrobiotic. So right now, I'm not really saying any label, but I do think that there's a lot of problems with commercial animal farming. Maybe it's better in Europe than it is in America. But in America, you do not want to be using factory farmed animals, not only for their meat, but for their eggs or for their milk. They're having a miserable existence. And so I'm just saying to people, see what works for you, and what worked for you when you were a 20-year-old yogi on the beach might be different when you're a 50-year-old lumberjack in the deep woods of the North. So and I don't think that one size fits all. So I'm not here to tell everybody we should do that. But I do think that eating more plant-based needs to be the future. We can feed a lot more people on the planet, and I'm all in favor of that. And I've written 2 vegetarian cookbooks. So one is a raw foods book called Rawsome, and I also wrote a hemp cookbook made from cannabis seeds. So I think that it's good to try different things at different times of your life and see what works.
And moderation in everything, I guess, including alcohol.
Absolutely. And sugar and fried foods, and eat all the colors of the rainbow. It's not that difficult. There's choices out there. Grow a garden, learn to grow sprouts in your kitchen, eating things that are fresh and vital. Grow something. You can't beat that.
And what about if we've got any listeners who haven't got a yard or a garden, but they've got maybe a window ledge they could use, or growing stuff inside? Is there quite a lot you can do in that respect?
Yes, unfortunately, I see that a lot of the seeds are being pasteurized. I want to encourage people to buy heirloom seeds. People have always saved their best pumpkin, their best tomato, and saved the seeds. But I think a lot of the seed companies don't want people to do that. They want them to buy their product again. So find out what grows in your area. And you can grow things in pots on a balcony or a porch. You can visit farmers markets and help support the local farmers. You can also conspire with your neighbors and grow things together and create community gardens is another thing. And I'm also a big advocate for walking more. Walking more, very often you find things in the field and the roadsides. Of course, we don't want to eat things growing within 50 feet of a busy road. However, no. I do harvest things, and I have several neighbors who say, come harvest the dandelions in my yard. So yeah, there's all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah. And if we've got any listeners who are interested in becoming involved in herbs and becoming a specialist in herbs, what advice would you give them in terms of studying it and getting into it, Brigitte?
Well, I think it's a wonderful study that you can participate in your entire life. There's so much to learn. If you visit my website, Brigitte Mars, spelled the French way, you'll see that I have several courses. I've just come out with a course through Sacred Science. It's called Kitchen Wisdom. Boy, it just came out. But visit my website and you'll see there's so many courses. But find somebody local you can study with, however you can. Maybe it's an elder. Find books of plants in your area, and I promise you, it's going to be empowering. It's going to be health giving. It's good not only for you, but for the planet, for the pollinators. And it's really a lot of fun. How amazing to be able to take some responsibility for improving your own health, to help your family, your children, and to be able to do it from your own home, your own garden.
Have you got any other projects coming up?
Well, besides natural remedies for mental and emotional health, I just came out with a book called Dandelion Medicine. Nettle Power, but please visit my website. I have a lovely little course that just came out on herbal kitchen wizardry. So, keep learning your whole life. That's the deal. Keep learning your whole life and, have fun with it. And what's really so rewarding is our planet really needs our help. And when we support herbal medicine, that means that there's going to be fields of flowers, happy bees and butterflies, happy children frolicking. And this is something that is a win-win for everybody. So I'm so grateful for you to have me on your show, Bob. And, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And please visit BrigitteMars.com, get my phone app, check out a book, find who the local wisdom keepers are in your area, because the information is available. You can do this.
Well, Brigitte, it's been a really great conversation. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show.
Peace and blessings to you and your listeners. Thank you so much, Bob.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family. And if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.